This is Industrial Edge, a podcast where we discuss the cutting edge world of factory automation and the technologies shaping the future of the industry.
I'm Lacey Chandler. I'm sitting here with Aaron Salsedo from Duarte Nursery at the 2024 Almond Board Conference in Sacramento at the Safe Credit Union Center. It's a well-attended show this year. I think there's over 4,000 people here.
It's a big number, yeah.
Well, Aaron, why don't you introduce yourself? Tell us a little bit about yourself, what you do, where you do it, and what you're looking forward to at the show this year.
Yeah, no, thank you for having me on. I appreciate that. I've sort of vagabonded my way through the industry. I started with Meridian Growers early on. That was my first in the nut industry career. And my family grows almonds, so it's always been something I've been interested in and done and been around. And I had some very good opportunities. I went through a couple of companies doing grower rep type things and some sales and marketing and commodity trading and that type of work. And then I landed in 2020. One of the companies I worked for was purchased by another company that was vertically integrated, which kind of left my position as a junior sales and grower rep in the wind. I had spent 5-6 years in the industry. I developed some good contacts and gotten to know some, established people within the industry. And I used some of those relationships. I started an LLC as a private sales contractor. And I've been fortunate enough to contract with some companies. I work with Duarte Nurseries currently. I also work with JSS Almonds. I send my almonds to JSS, so that's helpful. I had a lot of good fortune meeting a lot of very good people within the industry and having good relationships and really focusing on making sure those relationships are beneficial for not just myself as a salesperson, but, with the people I work with. And so far it's done me well. So that's sort of my short course on my time here.
Tell me more about Duarte Nursery.
Really, Duarte Nursery was a very good opportunity, and it came really at the right time. I got to know John in my previous work in pistachios, and we developed our relationship at some of the conferences and kind of working in and out with growers doing plantings and things like that. One of the conferences, I was driving him to the airport. He announced that he was going to run for Congress. And he told me I was, on the way there, and the excitement sort of started from there. And it's been something very special to be around and to see. He's a very unique person that has a lot of drive, wants to do a lot of good, is very interested, obviously, in making the farming community more stable in California. We've got a lot of challenges there. And, he stepped away from the company. Obviously, he can't be a congressman and be the president. So his brother, Jeff, took over. It was a relatively easy transition. I've really enjoyed my time working there. It's been fulfilling and it's well-rounded. There's always new adventures. There's, you're working with growers and investments and horticulture and, you're on the farm and you're dealing with, dollars and cents and markets and really helping growers try to make the right decision and help them get into a place where their investment, benefits them. And a lot of the people that we work with, their entire legacy, their generational farmers is based on doing a good job at farming and making the right decisions at the right time. And so I take that role seriously when dealing with farmers and not always to my benefit. If I think
Sounds like maybe you do some consulting along the way.
a little bit, yeah, and it's kind of unintentional. I don't really get paid for it, but it's I get to use
They know
broad,
that they can come to you as a resource.
yeah. So I take a lot of pride in that, and it's not always to my benefit. I get a lot of people that they come to me with some ideas, and I have to kind of say, hey, you may want to, if you've never farmed before, and, we start with the basics like your water district and what you want to plant, what you think it is. It's over the last, 40 years has changed significantly. And it really in the last 10, it's dynamically shifted to where if you're not really keeping track, it's
You made a comment there that made me think, if you've never farmed before, it's very on trend to start farming, ranching, homesteading, thinking about growing your own food. In my experience in this industry, and then going out into separate worlds, there seems to be a disconnect of how our food gets on our plate, or maybe even just to the grocery store. Just for the layperson who maybe doesn't have the kind of experience that you have had in growing, being a proper grower, seeing other people's operations, the desire that people have to have that type of operation, and then the end user, of course. Can you walk through, for someone who may not know all of these things, the importance of starting with, like what you're doing, a crop?
Sure.
The quality of crop,
Sure.
all the way into the management of getting the product, what you do with all of the product once you have it.
Right.
It doesn't just go from the tree to the produce aisle.
Right.
What happens in between all of that, and how it ends up that you and I are having a conversation when we're selling factory industrial automation equipment for food processing facilities, and you're selling trees. How does it make sense that we're having a conversation?
It's a big one.
Do you understand my question?
Yes.
Okay.
So, and by no means do I discourage anybody from doing it. I think really one of the critical issues that we're dealing with nowadays is we have a lot of people who don't understand where their food comes from. And I think that's really sort of the heart of that issue. Is you have really the first generation ever that has been completely separated from the farm. One generation ago, your aunt, uncle, grandma, grandpa, somebody had a farm somewhere, and you went back during the summer and you worked there, or you visited in the holidays. And so when I have growers come to me, it's not so much a discouraging, don't do this. It's there's a lot to know to make sure this is what you want to do. And it's not the retirement plan that a lot of people fantasize that it is. Like I think it's a good thing that a lot of people are wanting to get back to their roots and know where their food comes from, know how it works. I think that's very important. And I think it's, a cyclical cycle for, us as like human race. I mean, our food comes from somewhere. We've gotten so detached from that. We've been very fortunate to have that issue, but now it's becoming an issue where people really don't understand it. So, the parts that go into it is you start at the beginning. It's land evaluation. Do you have water? And that's really kind of the first question. Do you know where the water is? Because without it, the Dust Bowl happened for a reason. And then the next phase is, okay, when you have the land and you have the water, now you have to consider financially, can you make the payment on your mortgage if you don't own the land? And what crop will make that payment for you? And how long will it take until you get into production for that crop to start paying for that ground? I come from a small farming family, 5 generations. We're not big farmers. We only have 30 acres, but we've had to work to keep the farm going on many occasions. We don't quit our day jobs. The more you get into it, it sort of starts to stack. So now you've found land, you have a big investment, and then you have to start figuring out what commodity is going to work for you. And then you have to understand that there's a 3 to 7 year waiting period before you reach some kind of cash flow state. And that's not even profitability. That's just cash flow. And then the work that goes in ahead of time. So what I deal with on a regular basis is, okay, so you've selected your commodity. Now you're planting. You have to care for this plant, and you have thousands of them to care for. And you have to make sure that you're observing how that's going. There's protocols as, water application, fertilizers, pest management, whether that's going to be organic or conventional. And then those have their own caveats of how and when you do them. And then you have pruning practices. You have a myriad of different trials and different things.
I already want to quit this operation. There's a lot to consider.
And then you get to that point, and then you have a productive crop, and it's a very exciting thing. It's like, almost like raising a child. I mean, it's, life, but food, right? So you've made this thing, and now you're like, well, where do I take it? And now you have hundreds of processors, and everybody's wants to be your friend.
Can you explain what a processor is?
So a processor, and it's pretty general. There's almonds. We'll just do nut industry. You have almonds, pistachios, the big ones, walnuts, So the processor's job is to handle the product and get it to a ready to eat or close to ready to eat state. And then once it's there, you find a broker or a marketing entity. A lot of times they're vertically integrated and you can one-stop shop it. So pistachios are one-stop shops usually. And then on top of that, you have value added. So you have all these different phases. So you've had a crop, you've harvested it, you've found a harvester. They showed up. The trucks got there. They got into the truck. If they're almonds, they go to a huller. If they're pistachios, they go to a different form of hulling because it's a different material. And then they go to processing. And then from processing, they have to be sold.
What happens when it's processing?
So in processing, you have a decision to make whether it's going to be going to go to value added. Is it going to be bulk sold? Is there an option for it to be private label? It's got to be sized, sorted, and that's where you guys come in, right? You have the machinery and the equipment that a processor needs. That way you have the value from the processor to say our shrink is, we have excellent equipment. We don't have to run this multiple times through equipment to get the things that we need out of it. Because every time you touch the product, it costs money. And so, that big cross section, now we're getting into, okay, why is, Chandler Automation here in almonds? It's, they're selling top equipment to these, processors that are trying to save the grower money so the grower gets more money. And so, once you get it sized and sorted and now you've got to package it, and then it hasn't even got to the shelves yet. So I would say, 70% or close to in pistachios doesn't stay in the United States. It's outsourced. It's sent international. Almonds there's pretty close to a large scatter. Majority goes international shipping. It doesn't stay domestic. And then if it does stay domestic, now you have labeling. So it's got to go to somebody who's going to custom pack it. Will it be flavored? What flavors are we going to do? What size is the packaging? Is it going to a gas station? Is it going to a storefront? Is it going wholesale? Is it going to end up at Costco in a generic form? There's all these other things. And then they're like, okay, we made this money from doing all these things.
At what point does the grower make the money? It sounds like there's a lot of stages where it costs money, not just the inception of the crop,
right?
The management of the crop,
right?
The harvesting of the crop, then sending it to another place to get
right,
dealt
processed
with,
and getting it down to
sorting it through
sellable.
Whatever it needs to be, the end product. Then where does the money come in?
Yeah, so that's where the confusion starts, right? Because you go to the store and you go, 6 ounces of almonds or pistachios, it's $12. It's crazy. The growers must be making a killing. It's everybody gets a little bit on the way, and then whatever's left over goes to the grower. So there's really, depending on the commodity that you're in, there's some disparity on, how many people should be touching the product. That's why you see a lot of companies that are vertically integrated are very strong because they keep all that. There's no outside hands having to sort and move and touch and keep, handling this thing because everybody wants a piece of the pie. And so as a grower myself, it gets frustrating because you can see, okay, well, now you have economy to consider, which has political implications, and what's going to be beneficial for domestic markets and what's going to be good for, international relationships and trade and tariffs and that sort of thing. There's seriously considerable issues.
What are the factors that make a difference in how much is earned from the crop versus not?
So you go to quality and production. It's really kind of what it boils down to. The difficulty is that generally the more manicured a field is, and every year you're spending a lot of money per acre to maintain. So it's not just like it starts growing and then you're done.
This is like the pruning and
so you've got to be pruning, you've got to be managing pest management. Yeah. Keeping your field in a condition where it's going to be productive and healthy. Water is a huge issue in California. And so with all of those inputs, now you have to balance, and we've seen it the last couple of years in almonds specifically, is you have to figure out where your break-even points are. So it really is very business oriented. People go, oh, you're just a farmer, right? It's very much, you have to know what your inputs are because it may make the difference on if you make money or you don't make money. So if you really work hard to make a big crop and you have no bugs and you get really high percentage yields out of your field, if the market's down, you've spent a lot of money and you may not make the money back. On the other hand, there's some people that they send not very high quality product. They're, spread too thin, or they just don't have the input to maintain that orchard in a sufficient manner where they have a moderately good crop. Well, now the return's not very good, even if the market's good.
What are the things that influence the market? I know there's a lot of things that influence the market. That's a very big question.
Right.
But what are the typical factors that you're looking at?
So market influence, a lot of it has to do, a lot of it's external. Because you get into the United States in particular, we're not a non-meat protein country. So we have a lot of options. So we have to make, one of the big marketing tools we've been using lately
Did you say we're not a vegetarian country?
Yeah,
Is that what you meant?
Right.
Okay.
So when we talk about countries that are India, for example, they're not a meat protein primary country. So they're not using chickens. They're primarily vegetarian.
Yeah, I see what you mean.
And so
in which case, almond is a great option.
Almonds and pistachio are phenomenal options.
Yeah.
So what we've done is you look at, is it now a luxury item in the United States to have nuts? And there's so many other snack options. So things like the Almond Board of California, the Almond Alliance, there's a lot of coalitions, there's a lot of groups that are very involved in saying, hey, it's important that, whether it ends up being lobbying for a subsidy for the growers to maintain what they're doing. And a lot of times outside countries are what keep our domestic production going, because they do receive the majority of it. They're depending on our production to get their sufficient protein in their diet. So domestic marketing is definitely very challenging. I mean, you're competing with, we deal with Hershey's, we deal with, different candy companies. Now you have almonds that are, Almond Joys. You have your Hershey bar with almonds. And I don't even know if I'm supposed to say their names. I don't have any legal.
I can't even hear what you're saying, so
I don't have any.
talking.
Yeah, I don't have any.
I honestly can't hear what he's saying.
Legal exposure to say that what we do or don't do. But as an industry, we have to find ways to get that product into the market. And one of those things is getting people a healthy snack. The nice thing is it's somewhat trendy now to have health foods and have healthy snacks. People are more focused on, like you said, it brings us back to, we want to see how our food's grown. We want natural foods. We want to know where it's coming from. And so that's actually helping us in the market a little bit. So, but there's all sorts of things. I mean, right now you can have a volume issue that could change the market. We've got too much supply, or we don't have enough supply, and it really shifts.
What do you see are the trends this year? Harvest just finished. What are you seeing out there?
Yeah, so with the market itself, we had a little bit of a short crop on the almonds, which can be good or bad, depending on which side you're on. Essentially, we take an average of what our total planted acres are, productive acres, and then we have a guesstimate of what our average yield would be. We're a little bit short of that this year, which means that we were initially, I think the first projection came out about 3 billion pounds, and this year it's going to be 2.7, maybe 2.8. So
does that influence the market to increase the price?
Increases the price, correct. Because the 2.7, 2.8, there's, 500,000 pounds in there that are going to be, they'll turn into like a paste or a byproduct or an additive somewhere else. It's not really like I'm selling you a bag of almonds, all 2.7 million pounds. So what that means is that you have a smaller margin for higher quality products that are easily handled and put into the shelves. So when that happens, the buyers, they kind of hear, they're like, oh, I heard that we're not going to be able to get whatever we want whenever we want. And so you put a little bit of
We better go get it now.
Right. So it puts a little pep in their step, and it gives them incentive to go and get what they want now. So then
are you saying that the industry is optimistic right now?
Yes.
Is that why there's more attendance at the show, you think?
Yes. I think the energy this year, across agriculture in general, is looking pretty hopeful. Similarly, the pistachio crop wasn't as large as we anticipated either. There's not a lot of carry-in left from last year, which is usually what we anticipate using to carry over into the next year. So that's falling away. We don't have the backup plan that normally we have. The cushion's kind of going away, and so now we're having to deal with right now. So that makes a big difference, and I think we're going to see probably some positive movement within the market for the next, I would say, 2 years. I think, we were pretty close to the bottom of the market last year. There were some growers that were really struggling. I think maybe there's some more people that haven't given up yet, which you don't really lose until you quit. So hopefully they hang in there.
So bringing it back to processing, since that's kind of our common ground here, what does a grower or a broker who buys the product look for in a processor?
So brokers they're like third parties. So you have somebody in-house, usually that works for a processor that does the majority of the sales and marketing. A broker is used when there's a need for, let's say you have a friend that you're trying to get a hold of. You met at a party and you have a friend of a friend that knows them. The broker is the friend of the friend. As far as what a broker is looking for, they want consistency, they want quality. They have their own relationships with their buyers that they're trying to maintain. And so if you have a company that's using quality equipment or has a high standard or has just a consistent standard, then they know that when they talk to their buyer that they can say, hey, they're a good source.
You know what you're going to get.
We're not going to get any curveballs. Yeah. And that's really a big thing.
The consistency. I've seen people go to subpar restaurants just because they know what they're going to get versus taking a risk at a new place because they're not quite sure.
Right. Yeah. You get comfortable. You know what you're going to get. And a lot of times that's all it takes.
Safe bet. Really, it's like the history and the reputation more than taking the time to investigate their operations and what's going on inside. And how is that judged? How is that gauged?
If I understand the question correctly, you can't, there's always room to improve, right? So let's say that somebody is doing something that's saving a significant amount of money and getting either the same or better output. That is a huge margin for somebody who's dealing in pennies, really. I mean, when you look at these kind of large scale sales, they might be getting 2 cents out of the whole operation. But over 100 million pounds, that's a lot of money. Well, if you can do the same thing and save 5 cents, that's a much bigger margin at that volume. And that's really where the interest comes in and says, okay, well, let's say a company's wanting to get more efficient because the market is getting more difficult. The challenge is, okay, I'm going to spend X amount of dollars, and what is my return? Well, if you can say, I'm going to save you 12 cents on the dollar at the same or better rate of quality, and you'll be able to pay off this investment in X amount of time. It's the same thing when you're looking at developing an orchard. I'm going to put $3 million into this property. I'm going to put another $1 million into production and maintenance and farm management. But in 10 years, I'll be able to pay it off, and then we'll be cash flowing. And then it's at what level do you want to perform? Agriculture itself is difficult, but I think in anything, it's very much relationship based. And I think with good quality relationships, it's really, you get good word out that this is either a great company to work for. These are great people to work with. They're always there. They're consistent. They're transparent. And that really breaks through a lot of the, you get some nepotism, you get some good old boy style things going on. But I think now there's a lot of technology. There's a lot of edge to be had. And now more than ever, really, we need to be very efficient with what we do. Because there's a lot of constraints. There's a lot, California is a very difficult place to do business. And so if you can find ways to get an edge or find an advantage over your competition, that gives you a lot of leverage.
Where can people find you if they need to jump into the very exciting world of becoming a grower? Yeah. And what type of crops will they access you for?
So we just added avocados, which I'm excited about. I'm really pushing hard for some pecans. They're my favorite nut. I don't like telling, because I'm an almond grower, I'm like, almonds are the best, but bring on that pecan pie. So, no, they can come to me for vines, almonds, pistachios. We primarily do wine grapes for Duarte, but we do have some raisin varietals and I think 1 or 2 table grapes. That's a tough one to get into because it's very proprietary once you get into the table grape deal. Avocados, walnuts, and then hopefully soon we can try to get some pecans in there.
Are you selling any plants here at the show?
We have some at the booth. Probably come and see us at the end of the show if you want some of those. Well, it's hard to truck them back and forth.
My pistachio's doing great from, when did I see you last? APG last year?
Good.
Alive and well.
Good.
You weren't so sure it was going to make it in the cold, but it's doing good so far. I guess it hasn't gotten that cold yet.
Yeah, they'll be okay.
So they can come to you for those type of crops.
Mhm.
And can you talk to me about the volume that you do? They're not coming to you like they're going down to Kmart
Right.
or some store and getting one avocado.
Right.
Can you talk a little bit about that?
Yeah,
process?
It's funny because my wife's family, they heard that I worked in the nursery business and they were like, oh, my uncle's cousin needs a tree for his yard. And I was like, well, there's like Home Depot's great. Like I felt bad. I was like, I don't know what to, I sell, so like our minimum volume is 200 units, which would be 200 trees or vines, whatever. And that covers more or less an acre and a half. And so kind of as a direct supplier for agriculture in the large sense, I would say, I do anywhere from 5,000 trees or vines to, occasionally we get 20, 30, 100,000, depending on the contract.
And then, so let's say somebody gets any of those ranges of amounts of units, which are also plants, right? Plants. Then what happens? You drop them off and you say, good luck, or do you help them install it or any of that type of?
Yeah, so we spend a lot of time before and after making sure that, it's in our best interest to make sure that those plants perform well. Because it goes back to the relationship of saying they're high quality, they have very good attention to detail, they've been there for us when we've been in trouble, they've walked us through some problems, and that on its own builds a relationship that you can work off of word of mouth. These are great guys to work with. They helped us through tough times. We had some issues here and there. They were Johnny on the spot. They always pick up their phone. They said, okay, we need to pre-irrigate. This is how we fix the field. This is what we need to do before we get planting. When we're done planting, this is what we need to look out for. These are some pitfalls.
Sounds a lot like what we do.
Yeah. So it's customer relations. And that's what really separates a lot of the companies that make it and those that don't. You get people that are what I would consider a straw fire. They have something great and they're like, here, and they go sell it, and then you never see them again. And then you go, now what? And so we pride ourselves in being consistent, being there for the grower, taking the call, having the hard conversation. Our fault, your fault. There was a misunderstanding. And if it's the grower's fault, it's because we didn't communicate something. So we work really hard at making sure that we have good follow-up. We stay with the customer. We have the conversations before and after. And then once they get into the field, once you do it for a little while, you can kind of see whether or not they're following kind of the guidelines, and if they kind of freelance and they want to do it their own way, which is fine. But when that happens, because you get the customer that's like, oh, this is on you. And you're like, I can tell that this is a you and not
like
a me.
A lot like what we do.
Yeah.
Also.
And I think that's a natural thing.
It's not working.
Yeah.
Guarantee someone touched that or did something that no one touched it.
Right.
Swear, no one touched it.
And you're like,
okay,
I'm not gonna,
right.
yeah, I'm not gonna be heavy fisted with this, but would try to, figure out how to fix the problem before it gets worse. So, and I think that's just customer relationships. That's just sales.
What do you see as the most successful crop right now?
Nut crops, almonds are definitely seeing a bit of a light at the end of the tunnel. Walnuts had a much better year this year than last year, but I think last year was probably the worst year ever.
Saw a lot of trees knocked down.
Yeah. And so they're improving. Almonds are improving, but they were also, not doing great either. So I think we're seeing more of a upturn due to supply being less. I think we had a bit of an oversupply. And now we're sort of leveling out. We're finding that market equilibrium.
Because you had mentioned a little bit about your admiration for your boss.
Yes.
Are you interested in politics as well?
I think yes and no. I have a young family. So part of me is I'm a bit torn because it takes a lot of time and energy to
But it
do
interests you.
Yeah, I wouldn't say no, but it's definitely something that it's going to take a lot of energy to take on. And I've talked to my wife actually a little bit about that. And there's been some opportunities here and there where people are encouraging me. They're like, "You should do it. You're the one. You could do it."
What do you want to do?
There's a Senate seat in California that just so happens to be in my district. It's a responsibility that I want to do. I want to commit 100% to, which is a huge sacrifice for my home life. And so that's really the biggest counterbalance. I've got 3-year-old twins, and my wife stayed home, and so I've got a lot of responsibility.
Enough said. But time passes, kids grow up.
Sure.
So good to have some things to aspire to.
Yeah, I would say that it's not out of the question. I don't know if right now is the best time for it.
Well, thank you for joining us.
Thank you for having me.
Us.
Yeah.
You dropped a lot of really valuable information, well explained, and I think you'll enlighten quite a few people on how this whole thing works.
Well, thank you for having me. I had a great time. It was a lot of fun.
Okay. Thank you.
Take care.